Hi everyone, my name is Kartik and my channel is about mental models. In my 13th cognitive bias mini-series video, I will be talking about the status quo cognitive bias. You know the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, this bias is pretty much about how that kind of thinking can skew our decision making. In a nutshell, this bias is all about leaving things in life the way they are. Even though changing them would result in a better outcome. So let's look at a couple of examples. So example one, I'm going to call this insurance. You buy insurance online and the company has the auto renew feature function selected, and without giving it much thought you leave things as they are. After 1 year you are less likely to cancel the policy and more likely to continue with the insurance, which means the company is getting your business again without essentially doing anything. If the scenario was reversed, in that the company didn't select the auto renew selection, the auto renew choice, then far fewer people would actively choose to auto renew. And so the company uses this bias, status quo bias, to their advantage. Another example, example two, let's say investing. Let's say there is a real estate investor. That's their property, and the market value of their property is £900,000. They have an offer from a buyer for £1 million to buy the said property. Even though they're getting 100,000 over the market value, which is amazing, even though they're getting a higher price, the investor is reluctant to sell, because they have an attachment with the property. They've held it for many years and they also have many memories. This is again another example of status quo bias. Not willing to sell, not willing to change things, and keeping them as they are, even though they would be getting a better outcome than the market value if they sold the property. So, why does this bias happen? Number one, loss aversion. As humans, if given the choice, we would rather avoid a loss than gain something. It is irrational, but losing something makes you more unhappy than gaining the same exact thing makes you happy. So you become more unhappy when you lose, let's say, an item, but if you were to buy that item or gain that item, your happiness wouldn't be the same level as that you would be unhappy. As a personal example, I was somewhat happy to buy a water bottle, but recently when it was stolen, I was considerably unhappier about losing it compared to when I had bought it. So loss aversion produces inertia or resistance to change because we don't want to experience that feeling of loss. Number 2. Endowment or endowment effect. This is the tendency to give something a greater value simply because we already own it. If we have a thought or belief or possession, we are more attached to it and therefore reluctant to change it for something new. Similar to the investing example I just gave a moment ago. Number 3. Both of these are compounded by the third Y, which is confirmation bias. This is where we bias our search for or recall information that supports the thoughts, beliefs, or possessions that we already have. In other words, we confirm our view on what we already have, again, making us more reluctant to change. And I've created a video on cognitive bias as part of this mini-series. The link is in the description below, so please check it out. Number 4. Something called regret avoidance. We may make a choice simply because we see others doing it and fear that we will miss out. Taking an alternative option may be better for us, but simply adhering to the norm, i.e. doing what others are doing, reinforces our misconception that this is the safe thing to do, as it is less likely to leave us feeling that we've missed out. So we won't get that feeling, is what I'm trying to say. So we don't even consider the alternative because of that feeling of we could miss out. So that's the why. Those are the whys. How do we overcome this bias? Number 1, awareness. Similar to other biases, people tend to not realize that there is such a bias. And so understanding what it is and knowing ways our instincts lock us into suboptimal behaviors is a starting point. Number 2. Consideration. Taking time to weigh up all of the options and carefully giving each option an equal consideration. So you've got your present, and you've got sort of change 1, change option 2, change option 3. So giving all of these equal consideration and then sort of choosing what is the best way forward. By doing this, by taking this approach, you will prevent yourself from selecting the default option, which is to sort of stay in the present automatically. It might be better to stay put, but if you don't consider appropriately all the options for change, then you might be missing out on a better outcome, and this stops you or reduces the likelihood of that happening. Number 3, I'm going to call this rationale. It is not enough to simply alter our mindset. We need to develop a bias for action and exploration. To help, we should justify the need for not changing and see if that holds up to scrutiny. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, don't have rationale for changing. Don't make a case for change. Have a rationale for standing still. Make a case for standing still and see if that is good enough, if that holds up to scrutiny. So rationale for staying still. Number 4, plan. A failure to plan is a plan to fail. Following on from what I've just said about developing a bias for action and exploration, make a plan. We're more motivated to do something when we plan, and this increases the chances of actually taking action happening. We can also be biased, status quo bias. We can also be biased simply because it is easier to do nothing. Again, for this specific instance, make a plan and it's more likely to happen. Number 5, reframe your view. When I say reframe your view, this is in relation to risk and change. As humans, we are naturally risk averse, but often sticking to the same way of doing something can produce losses. And in such cases, it is, of course, safer to change. And so it's about reframing our view towards that change. It's not always risky, or it's not always greater risk to change. In certain cases, it is riskier or carries more risk to stay the same. But we would only know that if we do point number 2, which is taking everything into consideration. Number 6. Start small. We may avoid making a big change due to fear, complexity, or maybe because of the amount of cognitive effort required. So starting small is a good way to practice and exercise change. Such as, let's say, when you get into a routine, try and change it. Take a different route to work. Change your exercise routine. Maybe try something new for lunch which you've never eaten. The willingness to make small changes, explore and experiment can help build this skill of, willingness to change. It can help build this skill up. Of course, moving home, let's say something big, is different to changing your playlist. So this does require a different thought process, or many different thought processes, but the thought of change will seem less daunting. The thought of a big change will seem less daunting and feel like it requires less cognitive effort because you are building up the skill by making smaller, easier, comparatively easier changes. And finally, I'm going to call this, number 7, pre-mortem. Again, I understand that change is scary. So why not conduct a pre-mortem? So what you do is you imagine that you have made the change. So imagine you have made the change, and then you forecast different ways in which you think the change could go wrong. The idea is to try and think of the problems and then, so problem 1, problem 2, problem 3. So think of all the problems and then to anticipate how to address them before they have happened. And so we want to avoid having these problems because we've already addressed them. We've thought about it at the initial stages, at the pre-mortem stage, and we have put in thought processes, approaches. We've developed a plan to address if these problems happen and how to avoid them from happening if we can. This is very similar to second order thinking, to the second order thinking mental model, which I have also created a video on previously. The link again is in the description below. And this mental model can help you develop your pre-mortem a bit more, I'd say a bit more fuller, as it were. It can get you to think about it a bit more in depth. In summary, this bias, status quo bias, can lead to missed opportunities, stagnation, and suboptimal outcomes. And so by overcoming this bias, and these are the 7 ways, by overcoming this bias, we can be more innovative and be open to opportunities for advancement and transformation. And that's all for this video. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe to my channel. Also, why not check out these 2 videos on second order thinking and confirmation bias that I have mentioned earlier in this video. And I will see you again in the next video. Thank you again for watching. Bye bye.